Thank you so much, Mr. Vijay and Mr. Rajesh, for having me here today. I've really enjoyed my time at the campus since this morning. And, I really enjoyed your session and how you think about entrepreneurship. It's a very different perspective, honestly, from the world that I come from. I make money when people exit companies. So, but thank you so much for having me. Really looking forward to this conversation. Just setting the ground up. So, would want to keep this as conversational as possible, or if you have mics in front. So I don't want to be this session to be, like me yapping for 1 hour and, opening up for AMAs. So, anytime you feel like chiming in, this is your room, this is your stage, please feel free to dive in and we can get started. So a little bit about me. I work for a fund called 314 Capital. Today, we manage a corpus of over $300 million in AUM. So we started out in 2016. Last 5 years, we've raised 5 funds spread across 3 strategies. So we come in primarily at early stage. So we do anywhere between pre-seed to up to Series B, with starting check sizes ranging from $250K all the way up to $5 to $6 million. We're a sector agnostic fund. Portfolio for us is 80 plus companies. In the last year, we've delivered 3 unicorns. We have 1 more in the pipeline. And education, as an extension of where the fund comes from, is a huge focus area for us at the fund. So the fund that came before 314 was actually the first invested in Byju's. So that benchmark, or so what one would call it, a litmus test, is set really high with respect to how we evaluate EdTech companies. So that's about the fund. I have been with the fund for almost now close to 4 years. As mentioned, I primarily lead our end-to-end consumer focus. So any consumer-facing business across education, health, agri, fintech, content, commerce falls on my plate. And over the last 3.5 years that I've been around, I've invested in over 15 plus companies, 14 of which have gone to raise follow-on rounds and subsequent rounds of follow-on funding. So that's about me. Moving on, opening today's session, I feel, and of course, we set the agenda at fundraising, but it was also about narrative building. And one of the things that I strongly feel, as an entrepreneur and as an investor, but more as an entrepreneur, is that when you're sitting on the driving seat, you're not just always selling to the investors. Your narrative defines how people around in your ecosystem buy into you. So it's not just CEO, it's also CSO, which is Chief Storyteller at all times. So you're not just thinking about narrative, should not just be focused on thinking about how you get an investor into the business, but also how your whole ecosystem, whether it's your vendors, partners, clients, given the room, your students buy into you. So a narrative is not just a one focused solution, but it's a 360-degree view as to what you bring to the business. Talking about picking up a narrative, and I think this is where things get interesting. So as I think it was up on the slide earlier, we look at 600 to 700 transactions a month, of which probably I end up speaking to close to 100 companies a month on an average. Where things make or break is how you build the founding blocks of the building blocks of your narrative. So there are 4 ways you can do this. So you start from an industry, you start from a customer, you start from your own journey, or you start from insights. You pick one and at max 2, and that's where it's a solid block. The moment you try to mix all the 4, that's where the narrative keeps breaking. At every step of the way, you have to first think whether I'm starting my story at an industry. So when I say industry, what do I mean, right? So did the industry change in the last 10 years? And now are there gaps emerging, which I can talk about? And what is my wide gap, or what is my right to exist there? Or starting from your customer, right? So I made my customer the hero, and I'm solving a need for my customer that probably no other company out there or no other startup out there can solve for. Or as a founder, I've had a journey of my own. I've realized that there are certain gaps in the market, or there are certain opportunities that will go unfulfilled if I don't cater to them. And last but not the least, I've spent time, I've done my pivots. Somebody mentioned they were a third time lucky, right? So, the learnings from my last 2 companies, or the learnings from my last 2 roles, led to where I am. So this is basically picking up a building block of where you start your journey when it comes to building a narrative. So try to fix and focus on one or at max two of these and keep that flow going throughout the rest of your narrative is one tip that I think, personally, I feel that works really well, especially when pitching to investors, because it fills into like a more comprehensive and more concluded story as opposed to running in four different directions and saying I'm solving for everything and I'm the best out there. The other important thing while going through the whole process, and again, not just fundraising, is making it personal. So at all times, as I said, as chief storyteller, you're selling not just your firm and not just your product, but you're also selling yourself, right? So why you are poised to win a business, why you are poised, what is it that your product does that nobody else does, and how does it relate back to who you are as an individual at the end of the day, and especially when it comes to early stage. All investors underwrite market and product and white caps in the market, but more importantly, everybody underwrites a founding team. So if you're married to the problem, great. If you can show that you're married to the problem at all times and thinking about it day and night, and that comes across in your pitch, there is no reason why you wouldn't walk away with a check. Coming back, when talking about your narrative, it's important to know who, one, your audience is, and secondly, what is the time frame that you have. Again, when starting with this exercise, it's important to know that it's not a one-shoe-fit-all solution at all times, first. And secondly, your pitch has to be optimized for different use cases. So, for example, you meet me at an event, at max you get 30 seconds of my time, and that means that your elevator pitch or the narrative that you bring to me has to be so crisp that it gets me excited in 30 seconds. You write to me over email, I will not probably go through, and I'm being extremely honest in this room, I'll probably not go through 3 pages of essay about what you write about. But if you have one easy paragraph, or you have 5 bullet points, what makes you exciting, you have not anybody's attention in the room. When you reach out to an investor, you send the first deck. It's never necessary to send the whole pitch deck. A crisp, concise deck of what you are doing, what's working, and why you're an exciting opportunity, which, in my opinion, at max should take up 2 to 3 minutes of bandwidth, should be great. Now, you've done all of these, and you've landed yourself a meeting with an investor. Do not go on for 20 minutes talking about the product. Keep your pitch concise to 10 minutes. So, while everything that you're doing on a day-to-day is great as a business, but surfacing things that are relevant to the investor, and in your case, even any other audience, right, is very important. So setting context, understanding your audience, and always putting a hard stop on time is very important. That way you end up putting yourself in a situation where you're leaving more time for conversation. Typically, first VC meetings last 30 to 40 minutes. 10 to 15 minutes for this is ideal, so that you also know what the person on the other side is thinking. A lot of times, what ends up happening on the other side of the table is that if you've gone for too long and you have very little time left, there would be impressions that one would walk away with that are not an accurate representation of your business. And last but not the least, if all of these steps have worked right and you've landed yourself at a second meeting, this is where you go really, really deep. And by this time, essentially people mostly know what questions are coming up. So preparing in advance as to whether, and typically these questions vary across either little understanding of the problem statement, either it's around the market or the product or the business model. So whatever it is and the combination, just focusing on that and building your narrative just to substantiate these problem statements or whatever questions are coming up is rather important. So what are essentials of a good narrative? I am not going to talk about how to build a deck. I think all of you have been here for long enough to know how to build a deck, but there are certain sections of the deck which I would love. First of all, these are the things that should definitely be on your deck. Second of all, I would love to talk about how you build these things into your narrative and some do's and don'ts and pitfalls of understanding how to go about each of these sections in your deck. Any questions so far? No. Any inputs? Okay. Got it. Any of you have any experiences to share where your pitch went too long, or your pitching experience where you felt that things could have gone differently?
No, first experience, everything would be like, I was pitching for 1 hour, so it happened.
Got it.
Yeah, but a lot of VCs don't give feedback.
That's true.
Has been a constant, grip from founders that VCs don't return the feedback as detailed as they seek information.
Well, I'm sorry. We try.
No, we understand. I think one thing that it would be good for us to understand is how much detail is too much detail.
Yes, I will cover that.
And now I've started kind of starting from the question of what check size do you do, what ticket size, because you may end up kind of telling the whole thing and then realizing that it was
Correct.
maybe not a fit. Like as you started your pitch with like say 500k to 5 mil is what you invest in.
Yeah, absolutely.
What size you're interested in.
See, one thing about nailing your pitch, and I'll talk about this in detail also when we discuss market, is knowing your audience. So you've done everything, you've prepared for the 5 pitches I talked about, but you can't take that pitch to every investor that you meet. So knowing your audience, whether you're talking to an angel, a micro VC, a fund that's a $100 million fund, a fund that's a $200 million fund, a fund that's a $1 billion fund, all of your entire narrative and pitch has to be contextualized to your audience at all times. So if, for example, if you're pitching to an angel investor, their motivations are very different as compared to an institutional fund. So your entire narrative and pitch has to be aligned in a way where they understand what they are signing up for, and at the same time doesn't have to be, as you said, as detailed as it would be for an institutional VC. Any other experiences anybody would like to share? Sir?
So as I said, this is my 3rd startup. So the resolution I took in my 3rd startup is that I'm not going to pitch to investors. Yeah, because in my 1st and 2nd startup, I was running after investors, and what I realized is that I'm just wasting my time, chasing investors, Bangalore, Mumbai, and Delhi, and Gurgaon. And thankfully, that is one of the things that has helped me. I would not say that is the ego, but honestly, yeah.
So see, 3rd time lucky.
Also, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to. You are not going to chase investors. Investors chase you. Is that?
Yeah,
the money
that's a better situation to be.
Yeah. So in this one, is that how it is happening?
Yeah, thankfully we are profitable, so we define our own trajectory in terms of how we
Yeah. Also like fundraisers.
I'm glad the word profit somewhere came in our mind.
It's always music to our ears.
The markets have also like changed that way from last year to now. Like growth versus profitability, and profitability is being talked about more for sure. And to your point, of course, founders, like it actually takes say half a founder or one. It's actually like a full-time. It's actually a full-time role. Like fundraise, like between me and my co-founder, we have divided that part. Like okay, like revenue, like business, you're taking care of product tech, fundraise, I'm taking care of. Like we have kind of divided things in that way. And
Which one are you?
I take care of product tech and fundraise actually. And interestingly also, like at the start of the pitches, we were like at the very start, like 2.5 years back, we used to go at these pitches together, used to pitch together. Like after 1 or 2 pitches, we decided never ever we are going to go together, because someone has to run the business and then someone has to do the storytelling as
Correct. As I said, chief storyteller.
Yeah, and that storytelling is not only for the investors, for you to get the right team members, for you to get the right customers, for you to get the right strategic associations or anything. So yeah.
That's a very good point that you mentioned. Like I have 2 more co-founders. What we try to do in most of the things is we don't go anywhere together, because that's most of our time, when we are doing that. So today also only I am here. Yeah. But it's hopefully it's a good idea.
No, you guys are just curious, is it running around time or is it meeting with the investor time? That kind of weighs you down?
Not only the time that you spend, but the anxiety also that you go through.
Combination of the whole.
If you replying.
Yeah. Also, like I mean, at least the last 2.5 years, like because we have kind of started in the COVID time. Like my last fundraise actually happened while I was in Boston for 5 months, and I was doing because it was all virtual, so I was not even spending my time traveling. But the time, like the pitch may go on for say half an hour, maybe 45 minutes or an hour, and it may be with an analyst and Java partner, like maybe 3 or 4 conversations. And if you are 2 founders involved, and in a day, if say you do 5 pitches or 6 pitches, you are already exhausted and you won't have time to kind of run the business actually. So it's also to conserve that time that like one of them is taking care of this, and you're conserving your time between like the 2 of you.
Thanks. Another thing that I would like to highlight here is like more than the physical time, I think it's also an emotional journey for the founders. So starting from a place where you start questioning everything, you have the answer and then you start questioning again. So that really takes a toll on you as a founder. So it's always better to have just one person. I think all of us make the same mistake. We also started with 2 founders and then decided no, this is not how it's gonna work.
So all of you are multi-founder companies?
Yes.
Yeah, you are not doing it all alone? Very good. Alright.
So in that way, we were lucky. So we initially divided it that it's okay. What part I am going to take care of, what part he is going to take care of. We don't mess both the parts together. We won't be able to survive. So that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things about going into the fundraise is also understanding that it's a full-time responsibility and full-time bandwidth, especially at early stage, what I've seen in personal experience. And again, right, like more than one founder coming on the initial pitch, or like founders just investing too much time into fundraise while, the business starts to take a hit. So you'd never ever want to be in a position where you're digressing priorities for a fundraise. And hopefully at the end of this session, we should be able to reduce some investor anxiety. But any questions, anything in specific you want me to cover as we go along? Okay. Anytime you have questions, feel free to stop me. So starting with the problem statement, and again, I'll keep this very crisp and concise, and this is coming from personal experience than anything else. So every time you're pitching to an investor and talking about the problem that you're going after, they look like very short and easy 6 bullets, but they are not. They go very deep. So a lot of times what ends up happening is, as a part of your narrative, you're very excited to talk about what you're doing in your day-to-day, how you identified the problem, and as a result of which you've landed at a solution. It just comes too fast. And on the other hand, makes the person on the other side feel that maybe you haven't spent enough time on the problem. So while I'm thinking about the narrative, always separate your problem and your solution from one another. Problem is never, you would want to express your problem as a single statement, but that problem is never a single statement. It is a sum of all parts problem. So the best way to do this is to do a root cause analysis, really double down and double click on what all pain points are you solving. This could be again across your customers, this could be across your partnerships, this could be across a larger ecosystem, and this could be across a larger market. So always sit down with a pen and paper before you start building your narrative and really think hard about what are the really problems that you went after and what are the problems that you ended up solving. One of the things that ends up happening at early stage is that you start out with a product to solve one problem, and along the way you realize 2 things. One, your desired solution does not solve the problem you went after, or it solves more than one problem that you went after. Both are good situations to be in. But always focusing on and root causing what problem and hence what solution is very important. Try to refrain from clubbing your problem and solution slide in one. Your solution slide should only be solution, and your problem slide should only be the problem that you're going after. When looking at the problem, drilled out into what are the data and facts associated with it. So how do you guys want to do this? We can do this with an example. With it, you're building Air Black, right? Can you help us with some data and facts around your problem statement?
So, more than 15 million people enter the workforce, and in the best case scenario, most optimistic scenario, there are only 1 million white collar jobs every single year, and this is a very optimistic number. So next 6-7 years, 8 years, we're looking at more than 100 million people entering the workforce who would have absolutely nothing to do.
Got it. So what's your problem then?
The problem is that many people that I serve they don't want a white collar job because they don't have access to it. I mean, if they had an access to it, they would probably migrate to a bigger city and they do a white collar job. But they don't have a white collar job access, so they have to still solve for their day-to-day life, whether it is through freelancing, whether it is through gigs or whatever. Right? People either work for money or they work for reputation. And in my user case, the only solution, or the only solution to that at this point in time is doing grey collar jobs which do not have reputation. So I mean, think about a housewife. She's in a smaller city. She does not want to go to, let's say, a function, and at this point in time say that I am a homemaker. She's studied more than the husband in many cases, right? So she has to stand, like, she has to have her own independence. She has to have her own reputation. But the number of avenues available to her in a city like Agra, for example, are not. So I mean, the problem statement is that this person wants to do worth their time for either making ends meet or getting reputation in the society. But the number of avenues available to her are very limited.
Got it. And if you had to describe your problem statement in 2 sentences, how would you do it?
There are hundreds of millions of people in India who want access to opportunities.
Got it. So that brings me to my next point, which is after you've done the first 2, concise and use short and powerful writing to describe your problem statement, which is what we did with Vidit, and I think he did a great job, right? So, and show social proof, which is again something that, Vidit here did really well, which is saying that, there's a segment that really wants to do something, but because of availability of opportunities and despite having education, they're not able to do, which brings back to the first point as about making it personal, right? Along the way, when we go, one thing which we should always keep in mind, how do you marry the problem statement to not just your company, but to you? And in all cases, see again, right, like this is what I'm saying is ideal and I'm aware of it. But there has to be a reason why you picked up the problem that you did, right? Why you married the problem that you did. So showing social proof of that and making it extremely personal helps you win somebody's attention early on, right? It's at the end of the day, this is an attention span problem. So the more you're tackling somebody's attention span, and again, sorry if I'm being too honest here, is the way to win this. And while you're at it, just see if there are other alternatives and how they're going about solving this problem. 2 things will come out of it. Either you'll realize you've solved it right and nobody has done it, or you will learn about a better way to solve it. So this is the problem statement from Airbnb, and I will leave it to the room to decide whether this is a good problem slide or not. What do you like about it? What do you think could have been done better here? This is from their seed deck, so don't judge them too hard.
Looks like a nice one.
Looks like a nice one. What do you think, Rashmi?
So
And anybody else in the room also, please feel free to raise.
So this is all over the place, not really a problem statement.
Great.
So I feel that it has a lot to do with the solution part of it, what I can expect, what Airbnb might offer, but it does not talk about the problem as such that it's trying to solve.
It talks about the status quo more than the problem.
Correct. Anybody else?
Problem is defined well, but the depth and the magnanimity of the problem is not mentioned there. So for me, I'll focus more on it when it is too big enough.
Correct.
I would say multiple problems he is trying to mention. Instead of price is a problem, hotels and finding.
So he's gone back, he's looked at all his stakeholders and identified the problems. But I agree that this is a 10,000 feet level problem, which could have been substantiated with data and facts to make a work. They raised money, they're doing well nonetheless. But this is how they started, right? And I was trying to find the slide that eventually evolved into their Series B, but I couldn't. And it evolved, by the way. So, great. What do you think about this slide?
Already lost mention.
Actually, they ended up talking about it, that they changed their problem statement, like eventually crystallized it to saying that people don't want to travel to a city, they want to live in a city. That ended up being the online problem statement.
That's all.
any problem statement can also have different aspects to it, right?
Absolutely.
This slide, those three are critical aspects of the problem.
Yeah.
But there can be a summary problem.
Correct.
Especially with education, this is something that we face, that when we talk about education, I can't talk about a single problem. If I'm talking about, say, 94% of the people graduating not having skills, it's a two-pronged problem. One, the fact that they're actually graduating, and the second, the fact that they are not building those skills. So, more often than not, I've seen that many of these industries, they'll have different aspects of the problem.
Correct. Which is exactly what this company is going through, right? So there are problems across process and there is a problem across payments. Okay, any other thoughts on this?
Too much information on the slide.
Too much information on the slide, I agree. What else?
Along with the problem statement, cause is also mentioned. So some kind of reaching towards a solution along with the problem statement.
Correct. So the good thing that they did was use data and facts. You asked me a question, how much detail is too much detail? This could have been split. And where do you split this, right? So you split this between the problem statement here. He's identified the problem well. He's identified the lack. He's identified what happens as a lack of process in the problem. What he has on the right side probably could have gone as a part of their persona work that we'll again do later. Any other inputs? Can I move on? Any of you who's faced like a specific problem with respect to articulating of problem statement that we can maybe address as a room?
I think any business that has too many moving parts will face a problem of increased exposure to a problem.
Correct.
For example, for us, if we think about us, so unskilled graduates is one problem. Affordability is one problem. Like, spending, say, the paying propensity of that user is another problem that you might want to solve. Then pedagogy in which it is being taught can be another problem. So when the surface area of the problem is huge, then of course you learn how to narrow it down to maybe a few
Correct.
problems. But any business that has that kind of exposure to problems will struggle with this problem.
Yeah.
See, one of the things that when we were running a startup like 6 years back, one of the things that we witnessed was that when we were running a recruitment EdTech startup actually, we were pitched to Anderson Horowitz back then. So one of the things they said was that most entrepreneurs tend to describe the circumstances in which the problem exists as opposed to the problem that exists. So when you say unskilled labor, we're talking about a circumstance in which a problem exists, but the actual problem is that a guy not getting a job because he does not have the skill. So they clearly showed us the differences between how circumstances in which problems exist as opposed to an actual problem that you're trying to solve through a product or through something.
Right, so I guess the point that you're trying to make here is the why of the problem rather than the what's of the problem. So affordability is again a what of a problem that he is not able to either skill himself
Can
or
you
down the
earmark the
line.
exact problem that
Right.
exists and pinpoint the solution that you're trying to do?
Right.
Correct. Market is not a problem.
Market is not a problem, or probably. So if I am talking about the affordability of education, then the problem is not exactly, probably might not be the affordability. Problem could be something else causing the affordability, right? Probably he's not skilled to earn it,
Also,
or
the actors involved are important. Whose
Okay.
problem exactly is it?
In the voice of customer, the problem. That's what you're saying.
Exactly. I mean, the need that actually exists in the market in the form of problem.
So if you ask the student or your potential student what their problem is, they might not say I don't have the skill.
In the case of Airbnb,
they might say I don't have a job or a high pay.
In the case of Airbnb, the problem was that most people could not afford a hotel in San Francisco or in other place. If you go to LA or SF or Boston or New York, maybe it's very difficult for you to actually get a great hotel at affordable prices. So most people were looking for bed and breakfast that already existed in the US through Craigslist and all these different platforms. So all they did was streamline the process.
Correct.
So the use case was important, the users were important, and the problem that we were trying to solve is the availability of the place.
Specificity of the actual issue.
Right.
Correct. Which brings me back to root causing. And if you want, we can also talk about root causing.
Actually, to that root cause, like for example, he said people are looking for jobs or high paying jobs, but if you go a level above, people are looking to earn more, or they're looking
Correct.
for reputation. right? And then the ways to solve that in a different context would really be different. Like I can't solve a high-paying job remote in Agra today if you're not coding. But then can create 10 other opportunities for you that can make you earn well or achieve well.
Absolutely. Any other inputs?
It's very important to see why it's always important to go to the root cause. But one should always realize at what level the problem is addressable.
Absolutely.
So maybe it's not so important to go really deep into a problem. I mean, that's what I think. If I have to solve a problem in my research, maybe I'll first decide the scale. I'll go only this much and not below that.
So probably that will help you if you go a little deeper. It might differ a little. If you go a little deeper, then it will help you to scope out. So till what extent you are capable to solve it, and then it's the battle that you choose to fight. And rest of the battle, if you're not ready or you can't.
It's intimately related to, if you keep on thinking about it, it's intimately related to the sustainability of the whole thing.
Right.
Absolutely.
You'll get a sustainable solution, but you need to functional also. You need to be functional also.
Right.
So that's the point that I think was missing in this when you
Correct.
talk about root cause, and I did do a lot of root cause analysis and in incidents, accidents, in process plants and other places. So, and in research also. So, I think the major mistake which many academicians have made, and maybe it has come as a knowledge information to people here. Many good researchers, many gifted researchers, they chose a problem that was too deep.
Right.
So within a lifetime, it was difficult to, or within a time that they would be judged by the society or would get the feedback, it became too difficult for them. So
Correct.
by the time they
And
had a hang of it, something was already lost.
Yeah.
So this time and resources are also very, very important. So the problem which is addressable, I think root cause, while you would know, but it should operate at a level that is addressable.
yeah, and to that point, right, like once you do that exercise, you also know whether it's a large enough problem or not. To, like Vidit said, that can I go and solve a problem in Agra for a man who wants to make living by coding? But at
So like the problem of flying is that I don't have wings. So I mean, I can't fly if I don't have wings. So, I mean, that's the end of it.
Yeah.
How do you address it? You don't have an aeroplane.
Absolutely.
You have nothing. So the root cause of the problem is we are too heavy boats, no wings. The wind is there, but no wings. So should I then start growing wings? No.
But should you not, if you are trying to solve a problem which exists till whatever depth is, should you not go and touch the depth and then decide at what level you want to solve it? Because otherwise you may realize that just below you, somebody else has actually cleaned up the place.
this is exactly what Rashmi said, right?
So I think
And it,
deep understanding is important. Second, I don't think the deep understanding comes in one discussion. It can come as a bright light bulb, but that happens only in movies. In real life, you say it once, you ask yourself, you say it again, you ask yourself, you keep doing it, you improve upon it, you improvise upon it, you discuss it, ask people to throw stones at it, and then out of the blue something good comes up.
I think in most cases I've seen entrepreneurs straying away from first principles, not asking the basic questions that actually are required to challenge the specific hypothesis that you actually are doing. So once you do that, you're probably in a different uncharted territory without any explanation.
I think one other thing which happens is people spend too little time on problem statement, identifying the problem and jump to the solution very fast. As Einstein had said, that if you have 1 hour to solve a problem, spend 55 minutes defining the problem.
Yeah.
I mean, just to bring home that.
And that brings me to another point. Like sometimes you feel that the problem that you're solving is very large enough and relevant for, as I said, like different layers of the problem where you're solving it. It's very important to go back and keep that feedback loop going. So, like from personal experience, my first check that I ever wrote in a company was in a company called Cuckoo FM. So, what does Cuckoo FM do? Any one of you know?
Audio
It's an audio platform. Correct. So now there was a time when Cuckoo FM was growing, but as investors we started realizing, is there a plateau to this growth? And are they really solving a problem? And what their team went back and did? So they put a very small call button on the app. which we used to get rotated between the founding team and leadership team. So anytime a user was on the app, there was a call button. The user could call and they would just talk to their users. So there were certain hypotheses that, between us as investors and the team as founding team, we laid out as to when users were coming on the platform, what were they doing on the platform, what value were they seeing on the platform, because we were also at that lens where people were spending 80 minutes on the platform. Anybody giving you 80 minutes of their time in a day is a very long time to give. So we said, okay, we will understand what these users are paying for. And that feedback loop, it became the holy grail for the next 12 months into what we were defining as problem statements for the company. Forget about what solution we went after, forget about what category we went after, what user we went after. It boiled down to what problem are we really going to solve by continuing to acquire users, and what is it that will sit as, what is it that our long-term vision will be? Will it be dictated by what we can do, or will it be dictated by what problem we can solve? And along the way, one of the problems that they realized is that there is so much aspirational talent, and I'm sure, like I heard about all of your backgrounds, and this problem way better than I do, is that there is this whole aspirational base that's sitting beyond tier 1 in India that has not been privileged with enough opportunities, right? And where do they flock on? They of course flock onto EdTech platforms, but there is a lot of merit and value derived out of passive learning. So can you service this user better? So can I do better recommendations, for instance? Can I beat them on content? Can I get the top 5 businessmen to record podcasts in vernacular languages? Does that build me a moat? And like today, Cuckoo's crossed 1.5 million paid subscribers. It's one of the first companies in India to have that large enough paid subscriber base at a micro subscription level. But my point being that, like while you're deep down solving a problem, it's always important to keep revising the problem that you're going after. Because if you solve one problem for too long, then the problem also becomes redundant. And to what Vijay sir said, right? Like if you keep it at this level and somebody else solves another layer of problem, it's money that, that you could have acquired and you didn't acquire. Cool. Moving on. So we've discussed the problem. Now, how do we describe our solution? And again, right? So first of all, making it very, very visual. So, and there's research around it. So human brain adapts a lot more to visual than it does to any other form, right? So can you describe your solution in a manner that's visually very appealing and engaging? Is something that one should think about. Focus on key product features. You're doing a million things. Arman here is solving 5 problems. So he wants to come and tell his investor about all the problems that he's solving and how every feature is helping with the problem that he's solving. But is that going to help his case while he's pitching to an investor? Maybe, maybe not. So focusing on things that define you as a business, make or break, and keeping it, especially in your first 2 pitches, at your moat level is very, very important. Say more with less. So you're married to your problem, you're married to the market, and you're of course married to your company. That means that in your day-to-day, there is a lot of jargon that you end up using internally and externally, right? So you're walking into a meeting thinking that the person on the other side completely understands the world that you come from. At early stage, that doesn't happen. Somebody here mentioned like going from that food chain from all analyst all the way up to a partner. The more jargon you use, the more confused you're making a 24-year-old. That's a fact. So you might feel that, like using a lot of jargon will make you sound like somebody who's really done a lot of work, but the idea is actually keeping it simple. So if you can explain your product to a 5-year-old and grab his attention, trust me, your investor will give you money. And lean hard on the problem. So the other place where I've usually seen this break is that you've described a compelling problem statement to me and it fell flat on the solution. So anytime you're describing a problem, tie it back to how you're solving for it. So can we go back to your problem statement? Yeah. So you said unskilled unskilled workforce.
Not able to pay for solution.
And there were three things you said, right?
The pedagogy in which they
Pedagogy. So how are you solving for each?
So unskilled, it's like a 10,000 feet. Like you have the solution around that. I think affordability piece in which we took some time to really figure it out. Initially starting in-house short-term EMIs for them, and then finally figuring out there are NBFCs serving for that market. So bringing them in the loop, integrating them in the product so that it becomes a seamless experience for the user. They don't realize that they're actually not paying, say, 20,000 bucks, they're just paying 2,000 bucks. So that is from the affordability perspective, and the pedagogy itself, like we're still figuring it out. Because
So then you have one problem and one solution.
Sorry?
Then you have one problem and one solution.
I didn't get.
So you're solving the problem of affordability and your solution.
No, so pedagogy is an evolved. So say when you are starting out, you have your top of the funnel that is reaching out. They are very excited, early adopters. For them, reaching out and designing that pedagogy is relatively easier. Like they are coming from cities, metropolitans. They know, for that matter, they know how to understand English. Now, when you go slightly deeper, English becomes a problem. Then your pedagogy had to include that communication bit to really make them ready for the job. Next layer, even general communication is a problem. They come to the classes, they don't speak, they don't say it at all. So then keywords becomes a solution. That how do you integrate it in the product so that they are encouraged to speak. So I think that solutioning and problem statement also changes as you get deeper with the problem.
Got it. So if you had to make your pitch deck all over again, how would you go about defining the three key problems and focusing on your key product features?
Okay. I think at the top level, it would be like digital and tech is creating new job roles. Emerging workforce is not ready for those roles. I mean, as of now, this is the problem statement that we go for the first meeting.
Okay.
Then we go for the first meeting. Just affordability and pedagogy is no longer relevant for the first meetings, or at least initial meetings, until somebody is really interested in the business.
Got it. Any other inputs from the room?
No, but the problem that you said you are trying to solve, isn't the whole world trying to solve that problem?
But the problem is big enough for the whole world to solve.
Should you start with that assumption?
So we have, if you look at number of graduates entering.
No, I'm saying in India we are not short of numbers.
Yeah.
That's our core competence, so that's okay. I'm asking you, if you believe that the problem is large enough, and I'll be one other fish in the pond, there's a lot of food, I'll also get to eat. I'm asking you, is that a good place to start your journey from?
I think I don't have a good answer to that, but I would
Consider this. Whatever might be the problem, and the whole world is trying to solve it. But you are solving an element of that problem which nobody is solving. Or slightly less important, but if you can't find it, there is one thing which you are solving, nobody else is solving. Then the next thing that if you settle for, that you are solving it in a manner nobody else is solving that.
I would agree to it, but I think another component too, I think you brought it up in our initial conversations, right? I think most founders have that sentimental association with the problem. Now, for me personally, that sentimental association has helped me to stick to that problem long enough. Of course, how you solve the problem has to evolve, because if everybody is solving it the same way, you're not going to reach anywhere. So
then you can't just be saying, okay, so what if there are 20 people solving it, doesn't matter, the market is big, all of us can live. Then my submission is, then you are not starting from a good place.
So I think
You may end up, by the way, being that. That's a separate matter. But that's not the place. I would suggest you start and see, you are not only solving, and I looked at it this way also. I'm just sharing an experience. You're not only looking at saying, I will waste my money I will waste something else. We'll waste an important resource which the world has when you were born. That's the best thing that happened to the world. We'll waste that resource chasing something which 200 people are chasing. So try to be unique. What is that book? Idea of One.
Idea of One.
Yeah, have you read that?
No.
Oh, Peter Thiel, right? Yeah.
0 to 1.
0 to 1.
Zero.
0 to 1. I'm sorry, not idea.
There is idea to
Zero
one also.
Yeah, I recommend.
I've read that book.
You read that book, the very first line?
It's been a while.
No, the very first chapter, the very first para. He's saying if you are going to create something which somebody else is, by the way, whatever you are thinking of, there are at least 20,000 others, or 2 million others now, or maybe 20 million others who are thinking. Right? How do you become unique? Idea is to become unique.
But I think I would look at it as an evolution journey that you have to evolve. If it may be said that there can be 100 competitors or 100 players, ultimately it boils down to a few. In the long enough timeline and long enough horizon, it is just going to be a handful that is going to survive that. And for that, the constant evolution is a must. Like it goes without saying.
In any case, that will be required. Constant evolution is part of life. Take that for given. But you can't bank on that. You can't get on the train that this will go somewhere. All trains go somewhere, I'm sure. Train is running because it goes somewhere. So I'll get on the train, then we'll see kya hoga.
You have other options also.
So I'm just asking you to think. I'm not saying what I'm saying is the right thing or if I wish everything was right, then things would have been very different.
Cool.
Think about that, I think.
Sorry, so you were saying something?
No, I was just saying that we should look at that. We have an option. I think that's what was missing was the discussion that why do we choose something? I mean, it's good to do a lot of things, but you have other options also.
Correct.
That's where the precious resource comes into play. You have one life. You're there. You need to choose the best. Give yourself the best chance.
Absolutely. The opportunity cost to everything is basically what you're saying, right? Okay. What do you think of this? So what I've done is, so there's a problem statement there and there's somebody who's defined a solution. And I'm sorry if reading it is a challenge.
There are 2 slides, right?
Yeah, there are 2 slides.
I can read the solution, but not the problem.
I'm sorry to pull your leg, but what is the problem you are trying to solve?
No, we'll get to it. Give me in exactly a minute. Yes, this is an ad for Lenskart. So essentially, if you look at this problem statement, right, they've over-indexed on the problem, but when they come about talking about the solution, it talks about the gap, which was never addressed in the problem. And ad for Lenskart.
And I didn't understand the solution either.
And by this, can you also, okay, next question. Can you help me understand what are they building? Just look at the solution slide, not at the problem slide. What do you think they are building?
I think cooker is just a houseware company.
Yeah. Can you figure out this is the houseware company?
I just know what they're building, so I'm biased.
You got paper link.
Those are basically the high derivation. Competitive differentiation is something that they're showing.
Yeah. So, when talking about solution, marrying it into the problem statement and actually talking about what you're building, very, very critical. Moving on to this slide. So, again, impressions across the room. What do you think about this slide, which just talks about your product and your key features?
More visual, more relatable.
Okay.
Very crowded.
I think it's a good start.
I also like it. I think it's visual and also
Yeah.
there are many things that are subtly communicated
Correct.
without it being communicated in words.
So it makes you curious about what solution they're building and
Absolutely.
different things that they are.
Which brings me to my next point. Never ever leave your product slides without enough labeling of what they are doing. you put 4 screenshots and leave it to my imagination as to what you're building. I mean, I will obviously have an interpretation, but there's a good chance my interpretation of your product is not what you would want me to go back home with, right? So the thing that they've done right is that they've stuck to 4 key features of their product. They've shown you visually what it looks like and why it's kind of differentiated as well, right? So it's very crisp, it's very concise, and at the same time visual enough to know what the end user is feeling. Any other inputs across the room? Do students have anything to say here? This is closer to your generation than it is to ours, so.
There are too many elements if you look for it. I mean, if that can be distracting for a user. I mean, they want to focus on one thing, but it can be redirected to other if you go by the design.
Okay.
But this is not for a user, this is for a VC.
Anything else? Okay. Moving on. So you've done the problem right. You've done the solution right. Let's say you've identified a large enough problem. You've built a compelling solution. All of that is great until and unless you find the ability to make money. When thinking about your business model, again, do not go very broad. Do not over-index on all the streams that could open up in a 5 to 7 year period. But boil it down to revenue streams that drive business over a longer period horizon, right? So any business will always have more than one revenue stream, but every business will also have one major revenue stream. So when thinking about your business model, first start, you've identified the problem, you've identified the solution. Very, very hard question to ask and answer at a very early stage. How much money can you make out of this solution? And what actually makes you money, right? So in Arman's case, does solving for affordability make more money, or does surfacing a content library make more money? Or in Vidit's case, Vidit, can we talk about your revenue model here? So if you had to define all the products and services that you offer, how would you go about describing your business model?
So ours is primarily is pretty straightforward. Like we sell courses. These are 2-month, highly interactive, do it together workshops driven on our app. But essentially people pay for a 2-month program. There's a course fee, it's a high gross margin product, and you make money. The ancillary revenue streams are like, because like we train 12,000 women entrepreneurs in the beauty sector. That means that we are also technically the largest distribution network for makeup artists in India.
Got it.
So then there is a B2B revenue stream where these people buy products and we make a 10-12% margin. It's like a B2B, B2C sort of an offering where we offer them brands and they buy it for their salons or they buy it for their customers. So in turn we make it.
Got it.
Second revenue.
So again, what Vidit's done right here, he's broken down the core product streams and he's identified a corresponding target customer to it, right? So who am I selling the courses to? And with respect to creating an upsell, who is my target customer that I'm doing this for? Manvinder, can we talk about your business model?
Yeah, so our revenue stream is comprised of 2-3 things. One is the programs that we are selling. Second is the upselling opportunity that we get. And the way we have done that is the pricing strategy, especially if you talk about it, is tiered pricing. So you have 1, second, in data science or AI space itself, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth category, so that you're catering to, you can get the customer in and then you can, offer very customized solution, and our ticket size keeps on increasing with that. So this is basically, we sell the programs, 12 programs, and at tiered pricing.
Got it. So what would be a core revenue driver for you? Programs. Got it. And can you also help us understand how you went about arriving at pricing?
Pricing, because as I said, my first hypothesis was that we want to build a profitable ship from year 1, right? And as much as I'm from a top business school, and I had the opportunity in my ISP days to meet Rajendra sir also. He had come to a campus, I had hosted him, just like the way the students are hosting him. So that time also he was very excited about doing something in for entrepreneurs and all. So So I did not. So my first startup, what I learned is lower ticket size. We were selling programs for 2,000, 5,000. It just did not kind of help us scale, get to, for example, a crore in revenue or 5 crore in revenue. आप कितना भी कोशिश कर लो, बहुत it requires VC funding. Then that's where the investors like you actually come into picture. Small tickets. And so I wanted to build a profitable business, and you can build a profitable business where simple math is when your customer acquisition cost is low, at low relative terms with the price ticket that you are selling. So we started with a lower ticket size, and then we kept on every year. We have been 4 years into the business. We are just doing one thing. A lot of people have advised us that look at the lower ticket size, and we are just going the opposite way. We are just increasing the ticket size, adding more and more expensive programs. And thankfully, the more expensive the programs are getting, the more takers are for the programs. That's the interesting thing. So that's how we have just, looked.
Got it. Anybody in the room who struggled with pricing? Okay.
So started at different numbers, finally derived at something which is better than market, available for customers.
Got it.
Actually, a very basic around pricing, a very interesting funda which I got way back in 2012 was like set a price, get started. If it is too low and you cannot afford it, you're going to increase it. If it is too high, customer would pay for it and you will kind of reduce it. So don't do like over maths or over indexing on it. Don't do a month or 2 months of research on it. Kind of get started with some ballpark number and you'll kind of come to a pricing which is there. Of course, do the basic research, but don't over index or spend more
Got
time
it.
on it.
There's
Yeah.
something called demand-based pricing model, wherein you basically have 4 categories: too expensive, bargainable, and too cheap. So the bargain price is something that you should price a product at. But that again comes after talking extensively to users and understanding which segment they belong to, and what is the spending capacity of the segment, and then boiling down to a price that caters to that segment. So we've used it a couple of times in our startups.
Got it.
But the point is, not every company can afford the same product for the same price. So that's the reason we have variable pricing going on from customer to customer,
This is
segment to
fundamental
segment.
which you have to follow. It doesn't matter whether the pricings are definitely going to be different for different companies. So this is one way of looking at it.
In the same company, for the same product, for different customers, we do different pricing. So you go to any SaaS product these days, they have pricing on the website or they do not have pricing on the website. So that means they're trying to say that I'm going to give you a custom price for you based on your needs. So there are 2 types of pricing here. So, but again,
Got it. So now how do you build your pricing strategy into your narrative?
It has to have at least, in my case, 80% gross margin. That's why I put it on numbers. So if I know my cost, I know my unit economics, I know what I'm incurring on every test that I consume. So I set it accordingly on the margin side of it. But at the same time, if the customer can afford it, there is a market where in the US for the same product, the customer is willing to pay $10, I'm okay to sell it at $10. So in that case, market research is also relevant. So understand the market, understand the competitor, understand what value we are delivering to the customer. So the value pricing can also come into picture. You know what? The competitor is only giving you A. I'm giving you A, B, C. Are you willing to pay 20% extra? Definitely yes. That's what I've seen.
Got it.
So this is a journey from customer to customer, use case to use case. Value pricing is what I call it.
Got
if it's
it.
standard pricing, it could be value pricing.
And Raman, what about you?
Yeah, I think on the pricing which you said, the $10 US, just one point there is that if you look at Asian and Indian markets, if a US customer would pay, let's say $10 as an example, I think an Indian customer would pay probably $1 or $2. That's the ballpark which we've looked at. So basing a very similarly featured SaaS product along those lines is a bit of a tricky play. My only point there is, coming from a B2B enterprise sell perspective, if you play around with a customer, you end up setting a ballpark very low, and that sticks with you for the rest of your life. And that becomes a challenge
That's a
to
bigger
change.
challenge. Change is bigger
I
challenge.
believe B2B enterprise sales that way become very hard, and you cannot convince them because you try to convince them by saying the inflation is going up,
Correct.
and then they'll tell you it's only 7%, right? And how would you increase your prices by 100%? So that analogy doesn't work. So it's a tricky one. It's always about the value which you would create, like the features you would pack and try to do it better than the
Got it.
Last, the point that you made is really good. One thing definitely entrepreneurs should do is kind of throw the noodles on somewhere. Like when we were entering B2B, so we signed up India's largest company alliance for a B2B lead. Then we got that confidence. And for another company, we thought, just within the confines of this room, let's charge them 4 or 5 times of what we have charged them for the same thing. And gladly the company took it. And we were very, very scared. A lot of time, as entrepreneurs, we have to come out of that, yeah, it's too much. And the moment you come out of that, companies are ready to pay that.
I think it's a market play as well.
Correct.
For example, if you are in an aeronautical space where their earning potentials are into millions, and if you enter into them and try to sell something at a certain value, you probably get more out of it as opposed to selling to, let's say, a very low priced, low margin game like a farmer for that matter. So the sector also really becomes very important.
Absolutely. So which brings me back to my point, right? So while building...
So I heard 2 or 3 threads. One said, somebody said gross margin.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't remember who said what.
No problem.
And the second said we want to make profit. Correct? And the third is X is charging something for it, I'm adding something more, therefore I should get X plus premium.
Can I
Right?
have a chime in? I think I have a very, I've made a lot of mistakes here, but I think I've realized that for us it has boiled down to saying how can we generate maximum impact. Because if our goal is to serve a lot of people, can't increase the price to an extent that they can't afford it.
Correct.
So that has put a lot of pressure on our technology that how do we create affordable price points at which we make maximum money. For us, I think the framework as neither of these three has mostly how do we innovate in a manner that we're able to take an affordable product into the market that addresses a large number of people.
I think
So I'm also saying, and you also said that if you price it too low or price it low, then you're stuck with that price forever. That old notion that you can gradually keep increasing, that doesn't happen no more. All these solutions, what? If you had to ask yourself that I'm creating a unique product, I'm solving a unique problem, because my belief is that you can't exist if you are not solving a unique problem.
Sure.
You may end up solving, and others may end up joining the fray, but you have to start by thinking that you are solving a unique problem. If you are solving a unique problem, then you must be having a unique solution, and that unique solution will add a unique value. If there is a way you can add or attribute something to that value, right? So I am asking you, NIIT, 40 years ago when we started, how did we price our programs? There was nobody else. It was only one. How did we price our programs? We didn't have the benefit of all this expertise and experience that you guys brought. We didn't have any of that. So we have to have a very simple thought. In how many months should he get back his fee?
Correct.
That's the value I will consider when I add it. And if I keep that as the baseline, then I see who else is swimming around, who else is trying to approach the problem from the same angle, am I appearing too ludicrous? All those other elements come up. But if you start by saying you're solving a unique problem, then you should be adding a unique value. And if you're adding a unique value, you deserve that unique values. And then you multiply that by volume and whatever economies of scale to say, will I make money? If you don't think on a spreadsheet you can make money, right? Then you will never make money anyway. Right? Most of the time people stop at this.
You're just literally stealing my third point, but I'll let you have it. It's okay. But no, I think that's very valuable input, and which brings me to what I was going to say on pricing is, when building your narrative up, a lot of time what ends up happening is that you've described your business model really well, but nobody has any visibility into how you've arrived at your pricing. So defining how, and like we saw different approaches across the room, as somebody said, right? So whether you're deep discounting it, whether you're playing at a gross margin level, whether it's a value that you're pricing, make it very clear and explicit that how is it that you have arrived at your price and why it's the right price. It can be saying that I will pay $8 rupees for a Twitter tick, right? Or I will pay 500 rupees or 600 rupees for a Hotstar subscription, correct? Why is it that, you know, the same user will pay for both? Why is it that my user will pay for one over the other? Your right to win on the basis of your pricing and how you've thought about it is a very softer element that gets missed out when building your narrative. So a lot of time what ends up happening sitting on the other side of the table is that you've come and you've told me, like, you know, you've shown me sun, moon and stars, that, you know, you're going after a large enough opportunity. But when once, you know, I start understanding your problem statement, I realize, okay, you know, he or she didn't mention whether they are priced at benchmark, whether they are priced lower than benchmark, right? You've priced lower than benchmark, as you said, right? Like your pool opens. You've priced above the benchmark, that pool shortens up, but maybe you're making more revenue. So how you've thought about it needs to come out explicitly as a part of your narrative when you're thinking about your business model. So do not just ever leave it at, these are my unit economics and these are the 7-8 streams I will make my money out of. So broader major revenue drivers and how you've arrived at your pricing becomes instrumental. Last point, forecasts, which sir said, if you can't make money on an Excel, then how will you make money? So again, the key element here is that, you know, when you're chasing a problem and you're chasing a solution and, you know, let's say you've identified a unique problem, unique solution, there's a massive wide gap in the market, and this is, you know, back to the time when NIIT didn't exist, right? And you're going into the market with a first of its kind product. You're more tempted than not to make assumptions that are not real. So I don't get tempted by saying my market is, let's say, 1 billion users. So I just need to cater to 1% of my market, and hence, you know, my assumptions are as realistic as it can be. And I will talk about it in greater detail when we talk about the market as well. But forecasts always tie it back to base case assumptions, not best case assumptions. And in your base case assumptions, if you are making money, then you're a solid business. Even in your best case assumptions, you're not making money, go back to the drawing board and start from root causing. Any questions? Cool. So I think we've discussed most of this, so I'll just skim through. But you know, common pitfalls to avoid here. So you know, a failure to include concrete pricing when you are arriving at your unit economics, underestimating or overestimating your cost of sales or your cost of goods sold, and ignoring where you are in the market, right? So in the last 3-4 years, you know, especially on the SaaS side, there have been some solutions that have primarily won the market by deep discounting, and there have always been questions about whether that's sustainable or not. So keeping that in mind when you're thinking about your business model is very, very important, which brings me to this. So pick the slide from a deck that I saw some time ago. What do you think of how they have defined their business model?
Sorry.
See, I'm telling you, Lenskart sent me. So essentially, for your benefit in the larger room, what they've done is they've defined what are their target segments that they're going after, the products from which they sell to each of these segments, their revenue model across each of these segments, how they acquire them, and percentage of their portfolio, right? Or percentage of what's defined as their revenue. So now that we have that context, what do we think about this slide?
It's compartmentalized very clearly, neatly, so I know exactly where the major half of the pie lies, right? So accordingly, as an investor, I can assess whether this is sustainable or not, whether it's actually making money or not.
Jatin, what do you think?
I think I like that fact that they have actually like separated like which contributes to the major part of their revenue. So that part is good in this, and yeah, I think majorly that is.
Anything they could have done differently to the room?
Focus on one segment rather than three different segments. That's a matter of choice also.
I'd say the revenue part needs to be highlighted a little bit more when you're talking about.
Correct. Could this have been in bold?
I mean, when I looked at 75% mine, without reading it, I thought 75% margins. That's what kind of jumped out.
So,
this could just have been like one, because the primary revenue model is per transaction and subscription. So I think it's a great slide, but it could have been just like 2 lines.
I think the products are also overlapping, so instead of focusing and rewording them again, probably it could have been more.
Correct. Do you think there should have been like one statement in the end that summed up what the slide was talking about? A better headline?
We are 2 to 3% transaction fee, and subscription fee is waived off above a certain revenue.
Yeah. So the things that they did right is, defining very well where their major revenue is coming from. Things that could have been done better here is, bringing out the revenue model more clearly and summing it up, right? So what do you want me to take away after I read this? Do you want me to take away that, 25% of your business comes from SMEs or larger SMEs, or do you want me to take away that 75% of your business is coming from micro enterprises, right? Or what would it took away? So every time you're thinking about your narrative, and especially when working on your pitch deck, be as explicit as you can about what you want the investor to take away. So your narrative is yours to own. Your narrative is yours to pitch, and at the end of the day, what somebody takes away from your narrative should be something that you dictate, and not with very little room for interpretation.
One question: is that even relevant to you? You look at it as an investor.
Of course it is. Of course it is. So again, right, and given this is a candid conversation, typically how a VC investment process works is like lots of layers involved, right? Like you'll start, as Jatin mentioned here, you'll maybe start at an analyst associate, go to a VP principal, then go to a partner. A lot gets lost in translation. So a lot of times what ends up happening is that an associate would understand the business very differently from how a principal would and then how a partner would. So by the time you reach the partner conversation, you've pitched something, you've maybe pitched 3 different businesses along the way, you don't know. And at that point, you have lost the hold on your narrative, because the principal will tell you, okay, but this is what I understood. So very, very relevant. When you're owning your narrative, you're summarizing what is it that you want your end audience to take away, so that in the larger scheme of things, it's more consistent. And you are not spending your time, going back and fixing things from scratch. So traction, I'm sure all of you know, but these are just hygiene metrics that one should definitely always have on their deck. Moving on, again, a slide I picked out. I'll leave it open to the room to tell me what do you think about this slide. Does this excite you, not excite you? And what could have been done differently here?
I think it would have been better if they could have shown the growth visually.
Correct.
How the growth is happening.
Absolutely.
It should talk about past and future. It is right now the current state. If I have a past, I know it's really growing. If I know the future, I know where it can go.
Okay. Sadiq.
Probably grew 40% last month, but we don't know about the previous months at all.
Plus, how are the paying users doing? Not mentioned. Margins, net margin or gross margin or...
Correct. So, where you will, in more likelihood than not, you will always be tempted to put your best 5 metrics out. While that's a great thing to do, give context. So, let's look at this. Is this better? Is this in line with what you were saying? So, again, right, this doesn't, and I didn't add slides which had like growth there, but typically traction should be spread across 2 slides. One that summarizes everything right that you've done, where you are and where you want to be. And the other slide should be just like, if you have, depending on where you are in your stage of business, showing how your North Star metrics have grown. Like these are 2 holy grails of building your narrative and your pitch deck out. Because at the end of the day, everybody wants to believe that they're making data-led decisions, and you have to equip them with the right data points to get anybody excited. And see, this is Toptal's tech, right? So they're sitting at 1.1 million, but it's still exciting enough to know that in 12 months they have the potential to 3x. So if this slide just did not have the right hand part, I'll be like, okay, great. But now, because I'm able to see that in span of 12 months this business can almost grow 3x, okay, you have my attention. I'll validate it later, but you have my attention? Yes. Any other inputs here? Any of you struggled with traction slides while pitching? I think you want to say something.
Like there needs to be a past growth also
Correct.
in this slide, so that you kind of say that, hey, we have grown 3x from last year, and hence
absolutely
to growing like 3x.
But yeah, in your personal experience, any of you thought that?
They done that, figured it out.
Hmm?
Been there, done that, figured it out.
I think it's struggled with all the parts of it.
What about you, Ram?
What I personally felt is, in fact, this is a very difficult one, in fact, because if you've got a business which is inherently, let's say, service driven, and if you want to productize it at a later stage, so it's an obvious question at all times whether you want to show the past traction, because it will then work against you, as opposed to showing the ones which is actually working. And then the time factor also kind of creeps in and tells you that you've not done as much. So it doesn't show you in the best light, despite the fact that you put in a lot of effort to do that. So that's like a challenge, I would say.
That's the Toptal challenge.
Because it seems great that you would put the ARR and actually say that you're going to make it happen. It's even better if you say that you're growing by showing a
absolutely
trajectory as well. But I think just to put it on there's a lot of...
See again, right? And then this brings me to my next point. So when thinking about traction, do not go overboard with everything that you have to do, right? Every business, top 4 North Star metrics that define what success means for your business. So if you're solving for affordability, what does that metric look like, right? If you are solving for upskilling in a category that's under-penetrated, so when do you say, do you peg yourself to market penetration? Do you peg yourself to growth in the number of subscribers, or do you peg yourself to repeat, right? So depending, in a services business, right? Similarly, when you say that, you've had great traction, how do you define? So especially in services, right? Like we obviously make money on acquisition, but the real game lies in repeat and retention. So have you been able to retain 95% of your clients? Let's say you're at a million ARR, but your 30% of your clients retained versus 95% of your client retained is a whole different ball game to play. So defining your North Star metrics very, very clearly, what they mean to you, and sticking to those 3 or 4 core North Star metrics. Do not chasing like maybe 10 things to do right, but maybe 4 things to really nail down are things that you should think about when building traction as a part of your narrative. So, like Raman brought out like a very practical example, right? In like a services business, while you're doing everything right, it can look like that the business has not grown enough. But if Raman maybe talks about, how his customers are retained over 3 years, it's a solid story. Any questions? Cool.
I don't have, mine is not a question, but something comes to mind that ultimately it's the investor and the entrepreneur. I think the whole discourse just now going on is that the entrepreneur understands investor in that sense. Understand him should be able to present a narrative. But does the investor have a narrative? That's one question. Is it required? Is it an interplay between investor and the entrepreneur? Is there an ecosystem ultimately? Today, in fact, what is happening in the economy, world economy with COVID, people don't know whether cryptocurrency should be taken or not. And the governments are literally frightened if the entrepreneurs go for a cryptocurrency. And now it has come to a very different scenario. So I'm just wondering ultimately, like a nationality, it may not be nationality, it's the decision. If anybody, there is an investor. Parents are investor for the child, vice versa. A child is an entrepreneur. So should we look at it as an ecosystem? And ecosystem ultimately has to take care of all the stakeholders.
Absolutely.
But then, does this convey it? At this moment, to me, it is. That's a question which is coming.
And if you remember when we started the first slide I put out was chief storyteller, and it is not So this is more about narrative. We keep bringing in elements of fundraising in between, but it's about building your narrative in a way that equips you or sets you up for success to service all your stakeholders. So the conversation that we are doing today, like you can take something like this, like traction. It's not only for investors, right? It's also, for example, winning your clients. So in that sense, it's an ecosystem, but at the center of it, you know, what we're discussing today is how you own your narrative.
I take it. So should the ecosystem be if you say, go back to the first, like what I'm trying to say, if ecosystem is the framework, then I think there are many more.
Absolutely, there is.
Analytical should come now itself, and maybe I'm going to meet them, but this should be the issues as I think so. Anyway.
Absolutely. There's only so much we can cover in an hour, sir.
I guess this is also a reflection of the fact that you started out by saying you look at or talk to 600 or look at 600 pitches in a month, right, which is 20 in a day, you are all detailed. So therefore, you need it spelled out. I think that's what you're trying to say. If you really want to catch attention, then it needs to
Correct.
be A into B will lead to C, rather than saying, oh, there's 10 different things, and therefore, if you have to spend 1 hour to figure out what that C is, then
Absolutely. And again, right, like, which brings me back to my first point. It's not just for your investor, right? You're talking to a journalist. If you think investors have a short attention span, try journalists.
No, I would think this will also give an entrepreneur clarity of where they have to go.
Correct. So as an entrepreneur, and when you're giving your story out, every second sentence should excite the person who's talking to you, right? I shouldn't feel the need to snooze out. And you can, and you know, in 99% of the cases, you have enough exciting things to talk about. This entire session is just about prioritization, right? So I'm the last person to tell you what's the best way to go about it or what's the right or the wrong thing to do. But I have kept it at the baseline as to how to grab eyeballs, how to keep somebody interested in a conversation. And if it happens to be an investor, great. Which brings me to my next point, right? Owning your market. So, you know, every time you start a business out, and, you know, we've touched this, you know, in different forms and formats and conversations today as to, you know, when we were talking about the problem statement, we were talking about the solution. But, and, you know, all of you know, but I've still put it, there are two ways of doing this, right? One is top down and the other is bottom up. So when doing top down, a lot of what ends up happening a lot of time is that you're relying on somebody else's conviction to talk about your business. Always a best practice to not over-index your market on based on a top-down market approach. Always better to define your market bottoms up. So what do I mean by that? So, you know, and again, back to where we started. Is it an industry problem? Is it a customer problem? Is it an insight problem? Use that as a foundation to build how you define your market. Everybody has a different market. If everybody had the same market, this is an EdTech market sitting right here, right? So what is it that you are solving within the market, and how are you sizing it up bottoms up, is something that always sits better with respect to just pure narrative building across the board. Some pitfalls to avoid, as I said, using numbers that are wrong or not relevant to your business. So try to be as conservative as you can in your estimates. Not worst case, base case, and not the best case either. So stick at base case and start thinking about your market from a base case perspective. Identifying your target market. So if you remember the slide that I showed previously, there were 3 segments that he was going after. He was very clear about how much of my revenue is coming from where. That substantiated his calculations, both with respect to market and eventually forecast later as a part of that pitch. Very structured, very organized, and in 30 minutes you literally know what the person is building. Inaccurately mapping your competition. So everybody is not going up against the offline world, and everybody is not always competing with every online solution out there. It's a great outcome when you disrupt an incumbent, but it's not always the best to compare yourselves to an incumbent. So getting an accurate understanding of who you are really competing with, and you might be competing in different segments of the market, right? Like You might be competing with schools in some cases. You might be competing with colleges in certain cases. But are you also competing with let's say an academy or a Udemy? So when you come to pitch to anybody, right? Again, like a spectrum of stakeholders involved in your business, including your investors. Understanding your competition really well and mapping that out and saying, listen, you know what, Nitya, an academy is not my competition. Maybe Vedantu is. And I'll tell you why. Having that out is very, very important when you're building your narrative bottom up and presenting unrealistic market share. So I think we discussed this previously, saying, I'll own 1% of $1 billion market, just stay away. The other point, yeah.
Is it true that VCs adore large TAMs?
I was just coming to that. So the other thing here is, if you remember when we, probably half an hour ago in the session, we were discussing know your audience. Who are you pitching to? Angel investor. Are you pitching to somebody who has to return a $10 million fund? Are you pitching to somebody who has to return a $1 billion fund? So people obsess over TAMs when they have larger funds to return. So when going into a pitching conversation, do extensive research into, what's the corpus that VC is managing, what they have invested in, where they have made money, what is the size of those returns, right? So going to $1 billion fund and saying that, my market share is $200 million, you're a great business. Everything, God bless you. But does the VC make money? No. So alter your pitch. And the other thing is identify investors that match to your vision of the market. So nobody will know your market better than you do. So which brings me to owning your market. Own your market. If it's $1 billion TAM, there's a different set of investors to go out after. Or if it's a $10 billion TAM, it's a different game to play. If it's a $200 million TAM, still a great place to be in, because there is just enough capital now.
But still, I believe I had this problem, so I'm more closer to this. So let us say I go to a micro VC who can only give me 500K or 2 million. That's in the range of 200 million.
Correct.
But their challenge now is, okay, Jignesh, this is fine for now. The next stage, it's my responsibility to get you the Series A or Series B.
Absolutely.
And at that stage, this TAM would affect them, and I would end up not raising the money for you, so I would lose my money as well.
Correct. So that brings me back to my next point. VC as an asset class makes sense when you go chasing large enough
$1 billion TAMs.
I won't put a number to it, but when you're chasing large enough TAMs, right? Because that's what this ecosystem is about. At the end of the day, you have to look at venture capital as an asset class. You will invest in stock, you'll invest in mutual funds. Venture capital is just an asset class. How each of these asset classes make you money is very, very different. And hence, as a part of your narrative, it's very important to understand. Like Manvinder here, for instance, like solid business, profitable business, and somewhere along the way, I think he owned the market, right? He figured, it's commendable that he figured out that the best way to build for his market is actually to be a profitable business and not to raise venture capital as an asset class in the first go.
Yeah, another thing is.
Yeah, that will be done.
Okay. Nitya, one more thing, that a lot of times what is underrated is that your market can expand over time, and not just market can expand, you as an entrepreneur can expand your horizon. So you're looking at, say, 5-year horizon, you can look at, say, 15-year horizon, and probably then the market would be, or the adjacencies would be big enough to make a case for. So how do investors look at it?
Yeah. So again, right, like if you think that there are multiple revenue streams that you can open up realistically, it's always good to talk about it and tie it back to how it, comes back to defining your market. If you think you can solve 4 problems, solve them really well, and combined it can lead to like a $2 billion to $5 billion TAM, why not? Be my guest. But again, having a crisp understanding of what you are really owning and how realistic that is very, very important.
The right answer is this, but does that really happen?
It does, of course it does.
I've seen a few cases.
The problem with that is there's no proof of the pudding. So you may have the projections of that this subscription will make me this much money and this new model will make me this much and मैं K12 में घुस जाऊंगा तो इतना और बन जाएगा.
but then they'll be like, "Aaj kahan se paisa aa raha hai?" And then you'll be like, "Oh."
Yeah. So if you have some early proof that this works, like for example, when you invest in a company like Licious Series A is the hardest Series A ever raised, period. Because there were a lot of people who didn't put money in Licious because they weren't meat eaters. Correct? आपके पास product है, आपके पास market है, you're doing something, everything right. But, you know, like when they were pitching to a whole round of investors, one of the things that they said was, you know, we're selling meat and you're looking at me as a meat company and as a D2C brand. I'm actually a supply chain company. D2C is just a wrapper, one. Secondly, I've optimized wastage by creating an upsell of products. And here is a little proof that I've tried it out in Bangalore on a smaller set of, let's say, maybe just 5,000, 10,000 users, and it works. So when I scale this up, this is a tangible revenue stream, which makes the investors believe, right, that, okay, you've proved something out, it scales, it's a realistic market, it's a realistic market to open up. So to answer your question, if you want to go down that path, it's always great to have, you know, tying back to the first slide around problem statement, social proof that it works. Cool. Any other questions here?
In times of economic uncertainties, like right now, there is a lot of funding window for EdTech startups. Is there a contingent strategy you have which is dramatically different from the normal strategy you follow when you invest in different startups?
So see, at early stage, and especially, you know, to like the fund where we come from, we're anywhere diversified fund. So the themes that we go after will always keep changing every 3 to 4 months. And the whole point of this as an asset class is just staying on top of time. So even in markets like these, it's not that funding stops. It's just that, you know, how it's defined in economics, your priority sectors change.
So that's again agreed with the LPs and everyone understands.
Absolutely. And again, every fund also does this very differently, by the way. Like in the last 1 year, if you see, you know, there are a lot of funds who've kind of diversified into spaces that they haven't done before, whereas some have narrowed down into spaces that they were doing and only doing those spaces. So these are just strategies, right? So today when you invest in a mutual fund, right, and you go after a mutual fund manager, you will invest in something that offers you ALSS, which is more diversified, but you'll go after a mid-market fund also, right? You'll go after a small cap also. You'll go after a fund that does only, like, let's say.
Based on my own requirement.
So LP invests based on their own thesis, and every fund has their own thesis as to how they return. So market sentiment, and you know, when we do portfolio construction, we always account for the fact that the market will see ups and downs. Yeah. Okay. So I picked out the market as to how it's being defined by Place Shifu. What do you guys think?
Bottom up is better is what you said in the last slide. So this is top down.
Okay. Sadiq.
There's no so in this.
There's no so.
So it started top down from Dan and bottom up from Sam and showed the growth.
Prateek.
I'm trying to figure out how they've calculated the entire thing.
Okay. So essentially, if you see, right, as you said, it starts from a point of top down, but even bottoms up, they've tried to do some work. What Saurabh said, there could have been a SOM. If they did this bottom up, would this be a different number? Question to think about. There's no right or wrong answer. Ship rocket. So, you know, what do you think is going right here and what do you think could be done differently? Is it too much to digest?
Too much information.
Too much information, okay.
But again, when you say owning a market, does it add value if you show too much data into that?
Of course. Market is about data.
It's not very clear how much, in what size market they're operating. They're saying 3.5 million shipments a day. What is the total size of the zone? So how many competitors are there? How many?
This is just market. This is nothing to do with competition.
Is there any citations there in terms of where is this data coming from?
I think it was on the slide, but I've cropped it out.
Then fair enough. Then I see the big picture at the same time. I know how the big picture is just.
Correct. Is this a good bottoms up?
I think so. Yes. As long as citations are there, yes.
Is this a good way of defining where your revenue is coming from, tying it back to where your market is coming from? Does it make you think that they know what they're doing?
I guess the assumptions, unlike the previous one, are missing, right? Previous one, they made it very clear that A into B is equal to C. Here, the assumption said, unless my answer is very weak, at least I haven't been able to.
So they've essentially, if you look at the last bullet across the board, they've essentially identified how many monthly shipments across each of these types and boiled it up. But again, you have to mentally do the math. Cool. So again, right, like bringing me back to the point, it's when you own your market, very confidently they're able to say that our market is spread across, let's say, 4 segments. This is what each of the segments is driving for us, and this is how large this opportunity is. So it's very clear, very crisp, and very data driven with citations included. Coming to, in the interest of time, rushing through a few slides, talking about, so again, right, like when building your narrative out and pitching to an investor and anybody in general, sometimes you're so excited to talk about the problem that you've identified the solution. You forget to talk about the team in greater detail, or you don't keep enough time to talk about the team. What brings your team together? Why you are the right team? How many years of experience do you have? Personally, I don't think number of years of experience justifies anybody's ability to solve a problem. But, you know, more important, like how committed you are to this, how did your team come together, where do you come from, and what is your combined capability as a team. And also not only just talking about the founding team, but your leadership team, your heroes on day to day, when you're out fundraising and somebody else is holding the ground, right? Where do they come from and what are their incentives to join us? So, for example, you know, I picked it from again one of the pitch decks that I saw a few months ago. So it talks very clearly about where both the founders come from, what their journey has been like, and what they are trying to do as a mission statement and why they are poised to do so. So again, you don't have to follow this format, but just thinking through and getting somebody excited about you, and especially when you're raising your first few rounds of funding. As I said previously, right, there's only so much one would index on a market or product. At the end of the day, it's also how married you are to the problem, how personal you make it is very, very important, right? Like Vijay sir, when he was here, he said, I built NIIT this way. What did you take back? You took back the fact that there's somebody, he didn't say that NIIT grew like this. He said, I made these decisions in NIIT. So owning your business like it was your baby, like I wouldn't sell my daughter or whatever, right? So he made it very, very personal about him, right? But at the same time, what he was talking about at the core was the business that's his baby. So, and making it very illustrative, right? So who's the team, where they're coming from? Again, a good example of, you know, what experience or expertise that you have, which sets you apart. So as a part of your narrative, obviously always indexed on the product solution market, but you know, whenever you're synthesizing, whether it's 30 seconds, whether it's 1 minute, whether it's 3 minutes, do not forget your superstars and talk about them in greater detail. Any inputs here? Any questions, concerns, anything around the room? Cool. Last but not the least, we're coming to an end of this, talking about your go-to market, right? So here again, your go-to market defines whether you make or break your business. So how you talk about it as a part of your narrative, and again as a function of who you are pitching to, becomes very important in acquiring sustained interest, right? So there might be like 15 channels that you're getting your traffic from, or 15 channels you're getting your users from. But more likely than not, distribution is Pareto. Can we agree, disagree here? Okay, I'm assuming we're agreeing. So follow the Pareto here, and when talking about distribution, always use the Pareto rule to see where you are really acquiring your end customer, right? So And defining, the next point is defining the persona of your user, and I'll again show some slides as to how do you really define your target customer, how do you drill it down, how much is too much, and again, as we were discussing when we were root causing also, right? So then how detailed do you go, right? Do you solve for a man sitting in Agra knowing coding, or do you solve for a man knowing coding in all tier 2 cities, correct? So defining the persona of your target customer, what they behave, how they do, what they do in their day-to-day is critical when you're thinking about your go-to-market and defining it as a part of your narrative, irrespective of the audience. And focus activities are things that you're doing to acquire these users, right? A lot of people, for example, use influencer marketing today. So where it's working, where it's not working, where it's breaking, how you've optimized channel. Every business does not start from an optimized channel of acquisition ever, period. So how you have optimized a funnel that works for you and only for you is something that should be brought about as a part of your narrative. People know, everybody who exists in the ecosystem knows that no funnel is perfect on day one, but can there be an optimized funnel? Yes. Like how have you optimized that funnel needs to be a part of your narrative, and which leads me to conversion. And last but not the least, like how your GTM evolves over a period of time. So today, if you're acquiring users online, do you stick to acquiring users offline? Do you go offline? Today you use Instagram to acquire users. Can 2 years down the line, will you use, I don't know, TikTok or Snapchat to acquire users? So how you're really thinking about how your go-to-market is evolving needs to come in as a larger synthesis and as a larger part of your narrative. Okay. What do you think of this target persona? Do you think it's well defined? Okay, what could be done better here?
It's just a bunch of statistics right now. It
looks
doesn't
more like
really
TAM.
tell me
Correct.
what's my plan of action.
Correct.
Strategy out here, that's not fine. Go to one strategy.
No, that's fine. This is just persona.
How did I derive on that 40 minutes a day, 5 sessions per week, 48 per week?
That's their company's data. But do you think they could have defined their persona better?
They can say, let's
So
say, I focus on
primarily
US.
how they have going to,
Yeah.
how is not specifically answered, right?
Okay. Okay.
Under kids section also, what they are actually targeting with the kids, what sort of sessions? So either is it, education, physical education, what is, so something it's like you cannot target 7 years old across the countries, right?
Exactly.
It's not possible. Are they, specially abled, or what sort of kids are you targeting? So you have built a picture, right? But then that picture is too vague. I cannot visualize anything of those kids. So
There's
that
so many
is
narrative around the persona that we talk about that has to add context to the persona.
Correct.
So context and
Context is
definitely the features. That's why you build.
Do you think they've do you think they over quantified their target persona?
Yeah, I mean it's.
Did you think it lost the touch?
It lost the touch. It is over generalized persona. I don't understand what my target users are. I cannot go ahead and solve sessions or conduct session for 7% even of say for a country or for one particular one particular state. You cannot do that, right? Or even if you're doing it, you need to understand that who are these people, what they want from me.
Correct.
Right?
Void of an identity. I mean, I really don't know what kind of kids you're talking about.
Yeah, so that the kid identification is missing. Though the data is quite relevant, right? And so, but the identification of the kid was missing.
So how would you define your target persona?
So target personas, what we defined or what we started doing was that, okay, so if these are working professionals, where do they work? What is the context? What is the scope of the work? Right? What sort of weather? So we go ahead to the extent where are they field jobs, say sales rep? Are they people working in the factories where they cannot access their mobile? So visualizing every aspect of the persona. Say for example, if a salesperson doing it, right? So the context where they provide, what sort of education they have, what sort of communication need they would they would face, say 5 years down the line, what sort of people they would talk to. So it has to be top down. You list everything, whatever you can, and then start striking it out that, okay, where do you want to target first? What sort of people? So that will also help. That also help us in segmentations. That, okay, this sort of persona I want to target first, and this sort of people probably maybe later.
Got
So
it.
this also, and what also we did was that we started defining, say, jobs to be done. So if I'm offering, because people don't buy product, right? People buy solutions. So if they are buying a SaaS product from us, right? What solution, what value is it providing? What jobs is it doing for that person? So when we start writing it down, then we understood that, okay, they won't buy the product. We also have to build this ecosystem around it.
Correct. So then how did you define your target customer in the end? So who is your target customer, Rashmi?
So right now the target customers are all, we are into B2B, right? So the target customers are now these organizations where the employee strength is 1200 plus. So that is my target.
Any particular sector where these...
No particular sector.
Okay. Yeah. So this is my last slide. This is a slide on what I said, right? Yeah, how your GTM evolves and overall how you expand your business. What do we think here? So when we were talking about, different things that you should build as a part of your narrative around GTM, one of the things that we talked about was talking about your GTM over a period of time. So how do you grow as a business? Where else do you go to find business? So this is one of the slides doing that. What do we think about it?
It's still vague. It can be even more pinpointed.
Okay.
Shouldn't be more, when we talk about GTM, shouldn't be more talking about how are we going to get into the market? Instead of focusing more into what.
Correct. Do you think this is too vague?
I could not get it. How are they going to get into the market?
This defines intent basically, but not execution.
Could be, yes. When you say new states, there are 33 states to get into. Each state has got many cities, many schools.
So again,
north-south strategy is a particular language strategy.
So when talking about your go-to-market and especially around your part where you talk about your GTM expansion, million things you want to do in a million ways, stick to the basics and at the same time do not be too vague. So there are a million things to do, everything that you do in a business. Be very specific about what you unlock at every stage and how that gets unlocked. It could be just 3 things done right as opposed to 10 vague things. So saying I'll move from Instagram to Facebook is vague. Saying I will move from Instagram, let's say when I hit 5,000 users, I'm just making up numbers, right? And when I want to expand to, let's say, southern states, which doesn't cover Instagram, I'm just making up things at this point, right? To acquire these users, and it will take me to, let's say, my next 10,000 users, that's specific. Cool. So that brings me to the end